Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. I mentor a lot of developers, whether at Parsity or through a program I used to run a couple years ago. And one of my old mentees reached out to me and said, "Hey, what can I do to become senior?" And he said, "Maybe you should write an article on that." And I did, and now I want to share what I wrote in this podcast and tell you about the unwritten rules to becoming a senior software developer, and specifically 4 steps you need to do to level up. First of all, let me say something. Titles aren't everything, but it's silly to think that they're meaningless. There's a bit of an unhealthy obsession among software developers with getting to this senior level. I'm included in that, but there's a good reason. On one end of the developer career spectrum are juniors. They're expendable, plentiful, they need a lot of guidance, hand-holding. They're a good investment, and they're also a bit of a gamble. I did a podcast on this recently. You should check it out. It's called Don't Be Junior. By the way, I know you have to be junior at some point, but I'm just giving you a clickbaity title to explain why junior developers tend to have a harder time getting into the industry. Of course, you got to be junior at some point, but how do you move quickly past that? On the other end of the career developer spectrum is the senior. They can make or break the team. They have a lot of influence on the code base, the team, the processes. The salary can basically be double that of a junior. They take on the really tough bugs. They've made a bunch of mistakes in the past, and they know how to avoid them in the future, so you don't make those same mistakes. Believe it or not, most of your career is going to be at the senior level. This is one title I do think you should actually chase. Unfortunately, you're probably making one of the mistakes that I made when I was struggling to get to the senior title. First of all, the path to senior is foggy. It's unclear. Going from junior to mid-level is actually a pretty small step. You bumble around, you kind of know how to write code, you went to a program like Parsity or even a college, even MIT. I don't care where you went, until you've worked as a professional on a team, you still really don't know much about the whole team sport of writing code. Nothing can fully prepare you besides getting on the job and doing it. Race car drivers can do as many practice runs as they want. You can play college football and you can do all the stuff and read everything you want and all the articles, but until you step out there, it's difficult to know all the details and things that come from experience. This process for a developer takes around 1 to 2 years to go from junior to mid-level. In fact, at Facebook, I believe you basically have 1 year to get from junior to mid-level. They're like, okay, you come in as junior, you're going to be mid-level 1 year in, or you're going to be out. That is the deal. And at most companies, follow a similar process. If you're a junior beyond 2 years, something may be wrong, depending on the company. Again, these are subjective titles. I'm telling you what I've seen through years of experience in the industry and mentoring a few hundred developers over that time. The jump from mid-level to senior, though, is a lot less clear. Different companies have different guidelines. There's not like some universal checklist where it's like, oh, you know this exact technology and you've written this kind of code and boom, you're a senior developer. There's no universal standard here for software developers. And then you got people on LinkedIn, they say, don't worry about the title. Just write code for the love of the sport. And I'm like, great advice. Yeah, not like your title determines your pay, your bonus, your career trajectory. Sometimes I wonder like if these people with these big old brains have ever worked in a real company. Without a clear path, though, most developers fall into the coding trap. They do one of these 4 things, doubling down on their current programming language so they become an expert, in quotes. They add more tools to their tool belt, like Rust maybe. They're like, oh, Rust is the cool kid thing to know now, or Python. I'm going to learn that, and that's going to make me senior developer. Or they obsess over code quality. They're like, my code is going to be so good, it's going to be error-free, and that's going to speak for itself, and people are going to notice, and I'm going to get promoted because I write such good code. And then they wonder why they haven't been promoted yet. Plot twist. I was that person. I made all these mistakes. I've since gone on to become a senior at multiple companies, including the one where I currently work. And I was also an engineering manager, and I've rarely been the best coder on any team. In fact, I've never been the best coder on any team. As an engineering manager, I had the privilege of promoting developers to senior, and that was really cool to do. I loved seeing people progress in their career, which led me to want to work with students at Parsity and people that want to learn to code in general. I love watching people go from 0 to 1. And I also had the not so fun duty to share with developers why they were not getting promoted. Way less fun. I don't really miss that aspect of being a manager. I much prefer to be heads down in some code, if I'm being completely honest with you, but I really do enjoy working with people. Again, I can do that through Parsity and mentor tons of people at scale, which is really, really fun. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode. And if you're interested in becoming a software developer, learning how to build complex software, and actually get hired, join me at Parsity.io. If you're serious about joining, just schedule a call with me by clicking the link in the show notes below. Here's how you can shorten your path to senior developer step by step. Step 0. Let me be very clear about this. You cannot suck at coding. I had to get this one out of the way. We're going to get into less obvious stuff very quickly, but you can't simply be a likable yet terrible coder and expect to get promoted. Though I have seen this happen, the best way to get better at coding is to, 1, write a lot of bad code, 2, read good code and steal what makes sense to you. And I don't mean copying and pasting code from better developers. I mean, looking at how they do things. How do they organize their code? What are the patterns? Are there things you can pick up and shoehorn into your own code? That's what I mean. 3, you can read books on common design patterns. There's tons of books out there on design patterns. Read the top 1 or 2 for your specific programming language, and then apply what you've learned into your daily work. And the last one, look up design patterns for the framework you use. For example, you use React because, of course you use React because everybody uses React. Look up popular ways to compose components and software programs with React. Or if you're using Python or whatever you're using, look up how do the best people make programs with this? And how does the majority of people do things? Is there a standard way of doing things, right? Look it up and start using that standard. This is going to reduce cognitive overload. Basically, if you're looking around how to reinvent the wheel every time you do something, that's not good. It's stressful. It leads you to weird anti-patterns, things that people don't do. And it just creates code that's not reusable, extensible, all the things that you want from a senior level code. So if you write enough code eventually, you will get pretty decent. And if you read books, you're going to be way ahead of most people. The reality is most developers don't make it past step 1. They just write a lot of bad code and they end up being a junior developer with 10 years of experience. I did another podcast as well on that one. Check it out. You don't do that. You're better than that. Now to the real steps. Step 1, stop thinking about yourself. So I run Parsity, which I've talked about, and I ask prospective mentees why they want to learn to code. This is a question which usually reveals a lot about them, and I get some insight into their intentions. And I hear this too often. I don't really like to work with people. I want to work alone. I want to work from home and not deal with people. And I'm like, well, this is the wrong profession, my friend, because composing software is a team sport and it's difficult because you're not only managing your own work, but the more you grow, the more you're expected to manage the work of others, even if you don't have that manager title. A strong signal for a healthy code base, cohesion. Basically, does it look like it's written by the same person overall? It flows together. Conversely, a code base that doesn't have patterns is a huge problem because it will work. Sure, it works. But what happens when a new developer comes on the team and they want to know how to create a component or add a feature or add some sort of button or something to a page? And there's no clear way of doing things. One person uses Bootstrap. The other person uses CSS. One person uses Tailwind. Each developer is basically reinventing the wheel. This takes time. It leads to error-prone code, bugs. It just generally makes working a chore and not allow you to get into that flow state. And if you're a developer and you're writing code, you know what that flow state is. It's like that point where you're really into the code and it feels like you're just gliding across the keyboard. And when you're in that point, you're in that nice flow state, you can really knock out a ton of work. And it's hard to get there, but it's even harder if there's no pattern. Then it's like, you get analysis paralysis. You're like, well, I could do it like this, but should I do it like this? And you don't really know. As a junior developer, it's okay to get into this trap because you take care of a really small portion of the code base. Your whole goal is just getting the code to work, right? You're in there and you're like, okay, well, how do other people do this thing? I need to make this work. I'm going to make it work and patterns be damned. I just need to get this thing working. That's okay at that point, right? At mid-level, your scope widens and you might even be helping the junior person with their work. You might catch that error and say, you know what, we actually have a pattern for this. Why don't you use this pattern instead? So as a mid-level person, you can kind of detect the patterns that somebody else has made. And you say, oh, you're using, Tailwind. We actually use Bootstrap. And here's why. You should use this. Or, oh, we have a reusable component for that thing. Just use that. As a senior, you're the one creating the patterns that others can use. The human mind loves patterns. We are pattern finding wizards. So if you want to make code that is reusable, extensible, that other people can use and make your team's life better, you need to make reusable code. You need to identify patterns. And in the lack of patterns, you need to establish patterns. Again, this goes back to those books I said you should read. Find out ways to create patterns for others. Now you're thinking, well, how will the whole team benefit from this? If your code base was a book, basically, does it feel like it was written by the same person? If it doesn't, aim to get closer to this ideal state. Step 2, this is a fun one, or maybe not so fun, depending on how you look at it. I want you to run towards fires. There is one universal expectation of senior developers. They squish the tough bugs. I actually got my first promotion doing this. One midnight, we were doing this big deployment. I was on call. I was volunteered to be the person that was going to basically sit back and watch while the backend team did this massive migration. And I wasn't really supposed to do anything at all. It was supposed to go really smoothly. Of course it didn't. Things blew up. And then they said, Brian, everything's broken. Basically, can you fix this thing? It's midnight. I stayed up till 4 a.m. and I fixed the bug. And later I actually got promoted because of that incident. Now, I don't think that's a healthy way to work, if I'm being completely honest. But I do know that that was the expectation for anybody that's a senior. When things get tough, you call the senior people. You say, we are screwed. We need to get this thing fixed. When a critical incident happens on your team, like an outage or maybe a typo that your CEO found during a demo to his buddies on the golf course, you raise your hand and you don't say, I'll fix it. You say, I will investigate it. This is important. You set the expectations and you set the bar a little bit low, right? You say, hey, I'll investigate that. And then you update your progress every 30 minutes or an hour, depending on the complexity of the bug. If it's something pretty small, you want to do updates every half hour. If it's something pretty big, an update every hour will make people feel at least like they're in the loop. So they're not worried that like, oh, is he at lunch? Did he go somewhere? Did she head out to go pick up her kids? Let people know what you're doing. Trust me, this is a really big hack to being on call or working on critical issues. Let people know, be overly communicative. If you actually fix it, you're a hero. You're a hero and you just bought a whole lot of credibility, a ton. Now, if you need to reach out, you do. You say, hey, other senior person on the team, or hey, person that might know this code base, I need your help. You will still get the halo effect because now you've been involved with the fix. Even if your hands didn't write the code that ended up solving the problem, you're still involved and you have that halo effect. Remember, this is a team sport. So run towards fires, don't run away from them. Step 3, write less code, but write more. Writing code for a living as a professional is mostly just writing. Documentation, emails to that dude in marketing who wants to know why that animation that he wants is going to take more than an hour. He's going to be so pissed when he hears that. Creating tickets for new features that have all the requirements so that other developers can take it and work on it. Comments in your code that explain business context. For example, why are you converting dates to a weird format? Because maybe most of your users are in the UK. Things that aren't immediately obvious to another developer about why they wouldn't want to change that. You have pull requests with descriptions of the code you wrote, how to test a complex scenario, or just how to run your code in general. There's a lot of writing involved in being a software developer. As a senior developer, you basically want to scale yourself. How do you scale yourself? You could work a ton of hours, right? You could work with all the developers on your team and sit down and try to get your own work done at night. That's a terrible way to scale yourself. The best way to scale yourself is to write down what you know and share it with the team. You say, oh, here's a pattern I've created. Here's a service I've worked on that's kind of difficult. No one really understands it. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to share that with the team. Now more people know how to do it without having to bother you. If you say the same thing more than 3 times, you should write about it. That is my rule of thumb for when it comes to writing articles or doing podcasts. If I've spoken individually to about 3 people or so that ask a question, I'm like, you know what? There's probably some value in writing this, and then I can expose it and share it with more people and get all the hateful comments on LinkedIn that I love so much, right? So write articles that other developers can use and learn from your mistakes. Similar to what I do on this show, I love to expose all the mistakes I've made and the mistakes I'm making. to hopefully you can avoid some of these things or maybe just not feel so alone. Write not so cringy LinkedIn posts about things you actually find interesting. Share your thoughts on technology. Share your thoughts on patterns. See if people disagree or agree. Learn to verbalize why you think the way you do. Write to organize your thoughts and create clarity from the jumbled mess that's going on in all of our brains. Seriously, learning how to write clearly and express yourself and express technical concepts, it will do wonders for your career. Your company, your organization, it's bigger than just tech. Most developers, if I'm being very honest, don't know how to break tech into terms that normal people can understand. They rely on buzzwords, or they start going way too deep into tech. On a bit of a tangent here, I was in a sales call not too long ago for a school, and these people were delivering some presentation on AI, of course. And what they were showing was Python code and talking about AWS infrastructure to a team of professors. None of these professors, by the way, write code for a living. They just sat there, listened to it, and were like, I don't know what this person is saying. Can you believe that not one person in that room raised their hand to say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about? People don't want to admit that kind of thing. They look around and they think, wait, does so-and-so understand this? Because I don't. Well, if they're not raising their hand, I'm not going to raise my hand. And that's the reality. I think people way overestimate people's confidence, even executives and things like that. And they think, oh, don't worry, they'll ask if they don't know what I'm saying. No, they won't. So if you're able to make them feel knowledgeable about some tech, because if you're the CEO of a company or even like a VP or somewhere along that upper management chain, and you're asking somebody, how does something work? And they give you a buzzword salad. A lot of times they're too embarrassed themselves to say, hey, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. They'll just kind of say, oh, okay. And then just repeat whatever you said to somebody else. Learning how to explain things in a way that's approachable and makes people feel like, oh, I got it. That is going to make you the person they always want to go to. And they're thinking, who should I promote? Well, that guy, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. But Susie over there, wow, every single time I ask her, I not only can use what she said, but when I repeat what she says, other people understand. And now I look smarter. I'm looking good, so I want to make her look good. I don't want her to leave, right? Joey, he can get the hell out of here. Now, Susie, oh, she's staying. So how do you get better at writing? Honestly, write a lot. And also there's a book called On Writing Well by William Zinsser, Zinsser. It's a really good book. I know there's a ton of books out there on writing well. And you can even just dump something like your thoughts and your notes into ChatGPT and say, can you make this more concise? Can you clarify what I'm saying? And make it approachable to an audience that's not technical. Basically, learn how professional writers write good. Okay, one last thing you're not going to like. You might not like this at all. You can do everything I just said and absolutely not get promoted. If there's no budget for a pay increase, then you could have squished the hairiest bug, delivered the feature way ahead of time, mentored the other juniors on the team, and still not get the shiny title. You need to do these things anyway. Success will be inevitable. Timelines can be unpredictable. Remember, the senior title is the title you will have for the longest amount of time in your career as a developer. For many software engineers, this is the last stop. That's it. They hit senior and they are senior for decades, or they go between senior, manager, senior, staff, some other cool fancy title, but they're always kind of around that senior title. I went from senior to staff to manager, and now I'm back to senior again. I might go to manager again. I went to associate director. You can travel all around within the upper levels of the software developer career chain or ladder, but senior is the one that people tend to stick with the longest. There's nothing wrong with this at all. I've met 50-year-old senior developers. I've met 60-year-old senior developers, and they are worth their weight in gold many times because they didn't want to get into management. You're lucky to have those people because they have seen it all. They can help you understand why you don't want to use that service, why you want to use this pattern. They're excellent mentors for the most part, and also not so excellent mentors sometimes. But the ones I've been privileged to work with have all been top notch. So understanding this, that senior is going to be the longest stop on the career ladder for you, maybe don't speed run towards it. Maybe you can jog there instead. Break some stuff, learn some stuff, enjoy the ride. Because if you're 25 or 30 and you're tripping on this senior title, or it's been like 3 years, you're like, I'm still not senior. Well, you're probably just going to be a little disappointed when you get to senior and you're like, well, now what? Now I'm senior for 10 years? Does that make you happier? Do you want to get into management and manage people? Well, that's not writing code anymore. Does that make you happy? At a certain point, I realized it wasn't making me happy. If I'm honest, I was chasing money and titles to fill in some hole that my insecurity had dug. And I thought more money and prestige would cover it up. But the problem is that pit never gets filled. I had a number in my head. Once I hit that number, do you know what I thought? I want a bigger number. Once I hit that number, do you know what I thought? I want another number. Once I got one title, I'm like, well, now I want the bigger title. And I'm like, where does it end? Where does it end? At VP, CEO, and then what? If you're CEO at 40, what do you do from then? I'm not saying not to chase these things. I think it's important to keep incrementally making progress. I'm just saying that this whole idea of speed running everything is not only unhealthy, but you will learn quickly that no matter how much money you get or how many cool titles you have, you will not be satisfied. At least if you're anything like me. I really didn't take that seriously enough. And I sound like one of those people that says, oh, money's not everything. And I get it. Money is a lot. It's important. But at a certain point, having so much extra money is not going to make you much happier. I guarantee it. Whew, got kind of deep there, didn't I? So all I'm saying, back to the main point here. Yes, titles are important, but they aren't an indication of your worth as a person or as a professional developer. Now, with all that being said, get that title. I'm rooting for you. If you ever want some targeted advice, always happy to give that to you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or wherever you can find me. I'll also have a link to this article in the show notes. Hope that was helpful. See you around. That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. If you're serious about switching careers and becoming a software developer and building complex software and want to work directly with me and my team, go to Parsity.io. And if you want more information, feel free to schedule a chat by just clicking the link in the show notes. See you next week.